You don't know this, but I've been fighting with the press about the need to release, for example, I don't know, 8,000 resumes. They want to take a look at them. I was trying to explain to them that if they're looking at changing newspapers or TV stations, you shouldn't tell the boss, okay? And so we've had a little bit of back and forth on this, and I'm just trying to get us to a point where we're practicing what Margaret Thatcher used to call common sense. But in a case like this, there's got to be transparency. You have to be able to see what's going on, and we'll make sure you see it. And we're all very aware of it, and it's why we have legal counsel and everything else. But this again is a matter of common sense. Mark, you can't let him being involved in picking somebody you just work for, right? Unless somebody else does the picking, and that's the way we'll try to do it.
Governor, as long as we're talking about transparency, should that apply to the inaugural events as well? There are a number of events where the press will be allowed to stay long enough to hear you speak, and then we're going to be escorted out of the room. What is your thinking there? Well,
I think there's a lot of people that are going to come to my event that don't want you sticking a notepad and a pencil in their face. So I talked to Scott Milburn a little bit about this. I said, is there a little wiggle room? He said, sir, this is the way I think we ought to do it. Look, the inaugural is also not a, it's not a public, it's not, we raise the money privately and all that kind of thing. And Jim, it's not an attempt to, it's an attempt to accommodate all the different interests who come. We got people coming who just, they don't want to, Jim, as much as I love to talk to you, they don't want to talk to you. They want to have a good time. And they don't want some reporter saying, this guy had too much to drink, or this woman had too much to drink, or this guy back here is the worst dancer I've ever seen in my life. So we're trying to accommodate, and you'll be able to come in for some of them. We're trying now to work to get a little bit more exposure to the, to the actual inaugural event at the Ohio Theater. But I have to tell you, I went up to Cleveland and took my family up there to conquer the Matterhorn. That's the, I don't know how many of you know about this, but it was a wonderful track that they built out of right field in Cleveland Stadium, and you fly down this thing on ice and you get down into short center field. And I tried to invite some of the press to come and just hang out at the Matterhorn with me, but they couldn't do it. So Jim, we should have called you so you'd have had more access to me. I'm not sure you could have conquered the Matterhorn, Jim. It was pretty difficult.
One more question.
But look, I think we're doing everything we can to be open, right? I've had I don't know how many of these things now, so we'll try to balance it again. Yes?
Last question.
I had a question. I know the county commissioners here and the sheriff and all have been concerned about F4 and F5 people getting pushed down into the local jail system, and just wanted to know what your guys' thoughts are on that.
What you want to take?
That is not a simple issue, but let me just say it is an issue. When we have 4- and 5-degree felons that are non-sex offenders that are doing property offenses, they're doing just a few months in prison. I'm not sure that is the best. I'm sure that that's not the best place for many of them. But we do not have a system out in our communities developed to do that. And I don't believe that the jail system is the place for those folks either. I think technology, and I think there's community partners. We've talked a lot about prisons. We've talked some about privatizations in prisons, but there are a lot of community, private nonprofit agencies in Ohio. We're blessed with that I think have some ideas in terms of building a system. So it's not just having a prison classification system, it's having a criminal justice classification system that broadens into the community. So I certainly don't endorse just pushing 4th and 5th into the jail setting.
Well, I will also tell you, though, there are other ways you can do this. There's private monitoring that can work. There's nothing wrong with keeping somebody confined if they can be monitored. I mean, we can get Google Earth and it can actually see the chair you're sitting in from out in space. So we have the capability to monitor people. But, take somebody that's going to be sitting in the state pen for 2 or 3 months, it just doesn't make any sense. So that's what sentencing reform is about. And we'll have to bring people along, and I hope, I think people will be okay with this. As long as they're safe and secure, they'll be okay. Would you like to have a little less cost in this? If you're safe, I think so. I mean,
Mr. Mohr, speaking of costs, the outgoing prison director prepared a budget submission that said even at 100% of current funding, which nobody expects to happen, we'd have to see state facilities closed, services reduced because of increasing payroll costs and other factors. Do you think it's inevitable with the budget situation we have coming up that we're going to have to close state prisons and limit state services and corrections?
That's a long question. Let me just say this. I do not believe that it's inevitable that we're going to be closing prisons immediately. I think that it's part of a plan. I think we can do things smarter, with less resources, and just as effectively, and still maintain the prisons for those that need to be locked up. Now, let me also say this. If we are effective at building a criminal justice system that has the truly nonviolence in community settings, as the governor said, with GPS, and we're doing this in some places in Ohio now, in some settings. If we're able to do that, and that starts to reduce our population, then I think that there's a strategic way to reduce the number of beds that we're occupying in prison, and then that becomes a strategic way to reduce prison size. But this is not a knee-jerk reaction. It's a very strategic approach.
You know, and there are things that we're looking at that we're not prepared to tell you about today. But we think there are additional reforms that can be put in place. And but look, as I said, this is not just a money issue because the way that the prisons work now, too much recidivism, people clearly being held in the wrong place at great cost. But let's just talk for a second about the money issue. There was an article, Mark, in the Dallas Morning News on Sunday, which had a reporter from Texas begin to describe what they saw in Ohio, the loss of population in our major cities, the great number of our young people who go to our fine higher ed institutions who leave Ohio, the fact that the economic fiber of what built the state of Ohio over the last 50 years has been kind of sucked out, and it paints a very grim picture of the Midwest and a grim picture of Ohio. Now, we keep doing everything the way we're doing it. We're not going to make it. We're not going to make it. We are not competitive as a state. We have not generated the excitement in this state. I'm pleased to say that January 1, we all got a tax cut. The income tax rate has now gone under 6%. It's something that I can tell people around the country. That's the beginning. But from a standpoint of legal reform, regulatory reform, which means don't be hassling people that want to start a business, okay? Regulatory reform for lower taxes, that's how we're going to recapture our glory here in the state, to become a place where people say, yeah, I'd like to go to Ohio. I'll give you one example. This morning, I was talking to a gentleman who works in Washington. I always get nervous whenever I have to dial 202. But we were talking about insurance companies and where they like to locate. And he said, John, in the 90s, Ohio was a place where people wanted to go. They don't want to go there anymore. We still have great things here. And he said, number one, keep the great institutions that you have in Ohio. And number two, build an environment where some of these businesses may want to come. Because when you take a look at California, California is basically dissolving itself. I mean, they're on the road to bankruptcy. And the consequence on businesses because of that is really severe. Companies are leaving California en masse. I'll give you another one. New York is no great shakes. Illinois, any of you see 60 Minutes? Illinois is basically going bankrupt. They can't even pay their bills. So there's an opportunity for us to stabilize this state economically and then begin to reach out to other parts of this country to say, hey, come on in. You know, the water's fine. I was just at Kenworth Trucking. You all know about that place? I mean, you know, there's a sale there, right? You locate in southern Ohio, you get hard work, you get really good workers, you get low costs, you have high productivity. We have to make sure that we can have an environment where people are going to be excited about being in the heartland of our country. And we're going to do everything we can to be the leader. So it's a long answer to a short question. That's why I got those three-legged stools just turned into five. Thank you all very much and happy